Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel. And yes, I am still on vacation away from my regular setup, so I'm currently sitting on the floor in a hotel room bathroom, but I'm still ready to give you my top starts for Week 8 of the 2022 fantasy football season. And we're going to jump right in at the quarterback position. We're going to go with Tua at Detroit in Week 8. He has been a little disappointing after that big 6-touchdown week in Week 2 against Baltimore. But he was dealing with that injury in that Cincinnati game. He got knocked out, missed a couple weeks, obviously. Came back in Week 7. He started hot, and then it kind of slowed down. He didn't do much for the rest of the game, but he was just a little bit off on some throws. And with the weapons that he has, I think that a big performance is coming, and I think it could come as soon as Week 8 against Detroit, who is really bad at defending quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. They're just bad at defense in general. So Week 8, I love Tua as a nice start with some upside. All right, next, I'm going to go with more of a streaming option with Andy Dalton or whoever plays quarterback for the Saints against the Las Vegas Raiders. Last I heard, Andy Dalton should be the starter. This just comes down to matchup. The Raiders are a great matchup for fantasy quarterbacks. And last week against Arizona, he was the quarterback 2 on the week. Even though he didn't play well from an NFL perspective, he had a couple of disgusting turnovers. He was able to put together some nice throws, had 4 touchdowns, sort of like a garbage time situation. But it's a good matchup, and he has shown an ability to put up a big game. He did last week, so I'm not saying he's a must start or anything, but if you're dealing with like a bye week or something, he's someone you could pick up, and it is a great matchup. Now we're going to move on to the running back position, and I'm going to go with Kenneth Walker, running back of the Seattle Seahawks. So this is probably the last time that I could realistically talk about him as a start because he's pretty much an auto start at this point. So I'm just bringing him up here because, just in my opinion at least, and in the opinions of others I'm sure, he is pretty much a locked and loaded every week starter. Since he's taken over for an injured Rashad Penny in half PPR, he's put up 18 and 28.7 points. Now he gets another good matchup against the Giants. They're not that good at stopping the run, so he's getting all the volume on the ground. He's not seeing a ton of work in the passing game, but he doesn't really need it. And if he does get some work in the passing game, which he might depending on the status of DK Metcalf, regardless, he should be a smash play in Week 8 and pretty much every week moving forward. Next up, we are going to go with Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins, same team as Tua. You might be thinking, how can you make the quarterback and the running back of the same team against the same opponent both the start of the week? Well, the Lions' defense is just that bad that both players, both positions can succeed in this game. Obviously, moving a little forward to wide receiver, I do like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill as well. But those guys are kind of auto starts each and every week at this point. Mostert is someone that you might not think of as an auto start, but he's approaching that territory just because he's getting all the volume in that Miami Dolphins backfield. He is involved in the passing game a little bit, as you can see his target numbers here, and he's putting up, decent point totals, 18.7, only 5.3, but then 18.9. So in Week 8 against the Detroit Lions, that is an amazing matchup. He should see all the volume, and he should be able to run all over them. And then one final thing before we move on to the next player is that if Chase Edmonds is out there on your waiver wire, I would pick him up. Or if you're making a trade, try to receive Chase Edmonds as sort of a throw-in player because Raheem Mostert is 30 years old and he does have a history of injury. So if Mostert were to go down, Chase Edmonds would once again become a relevant and very good fantasy option. So just think of him as like a handcuff. Doesn't have a ton of standalone value at this point. But try to add Chase Edmonds to your team because if Mostert does go down, it'll be a mad dash to the waiver wire for Chase Edmonds. And my final start of the week at the running back position is going to be Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys. It's looking like Ezekiel Elliott, the regular starting running back for the Cowboys, is not going to play. So it should be Tony Pollard getting the majority of the work out of that Dallas backfield. And in a matchup against the Chicago Bears at home, that is a recipe for fantasy success. He has never been a huge volume guy just because Ezekiel Elliott has always kind of been their lead back. But when he does have those opportunities, he makes the most of his touches. He does have big play ability as well, so in a matchup against Chicago, I think he's someone that you could definitely put in your lineup, and I would expect good things out of Tony Pollard this week. All right, so far I think this little bathroom setup is going pretty well. I'm holding the laptop on my knees right now, so hopefully I'm not shaking it too much, but we're going to move on to the wide receiver position. We're going to go with DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals, and I'm kind of like Kenneth Walker. I'm just bringing him up here because he's probably going to be an auto start each and every week moving forward. At least if things go as well as they did in week 7 against the Saints. First game back from his suspension, he saw 14 targets, caught 10 of them for 103 yards. It looks like he's back for fantasy purposes. If Hollywood Brown was still in the picture, it would be a little bit more of a split with the passing volume between him and Hollywood. But with no Marquise Brown there, he should be that number 1 receiver, unquestioned. With Zach Ertz, pretty much the only competition for targets that anything like substantial. So in week 8 against the Vikings have my Minnesota Vikings. They have their cornerbacks have been playing all right this season, but I just think he will find a way to get his receptions. He should be targeted a lot, and it could be a high-scoring game depending on how things shake out. So I would roll out DeAndre Hopkins with confidence. He is back for fantasy purposes this season. So DeAndre Hopkins is a lock for the Hall of Fame. He's a seasoned veteran, been in the league for a long time. Now we're going to talk about a rookie wide receiver who is showing that he can ball with the best of them, and that is Chris Olave of the New Orleans Saints. I said I like the Saints quarterback, Andy Dalton, if he's the starter, or Jameis Winston if Jameis does start. But either way, whoever starts for the Saints does have to throw the ball to someone, so I think that someone is going to be Chris Olave. Look at what he's done for fantasy this season in half PPR. He's been about as consistent as you can be, especially after his first couple games, and he has put up some big games, like almost 20 points in fantasy. That's really amazing. He's been balling out, and the Saints receivers are still banged up. He has been necessary to this offense just because of the Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry injury situations, and those guys are still banged up, so he should be locked in for his usual volume. And then, like I said, with the quarterback position, it's a great matchup for this offense in general against the Raiders. Their defense is terrible. So I think Chris Olave is a very safe play. He's guaranteed to see volume in a good matchup, but he also has that field stretching ability where he can make a big play, and he does have week winning upside. So I think he's basically an auto start for this game. And then finally, with the Jamar Chase injury for the Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver core, that just means that wide receivers T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd should be even more secure in their volume. The Bengals are passing the ball a ton, and in Week 8 against the Cleveland Browns, I think that both T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd can find success for the Bengals at that wide receiver position. Higgins is someone you're probably starting each week regardless, but now with no Jamar Chase there against the Cleveland Browns, he should be a solid bet for fantasy production. And just taking a look at what Tyler Boyd has done this season, operating as their wide receiver 3, he has still been very fantasy relevant. It's been on the back of a couple big performances, but now with no Jamar Chase, he is, more likely than ever to have a good game for fantasy. Coming off a Week 7 performance where he put up 8 for 155 and a touchdown, he was the wide receiver 3 on the week. I think he should be able to keep that momentum rolling. Obviously, I'm not calling for a top 5 finish for Tyler Boyd, but I think he's someone that, depending on your injury situation or your bye week situation, he is someone that you could also use in fantasy this week. And I also think Joe Mixon will get his as well. But we're going to just focus on the wide receivers here with that Jamar Chase injury. So I think both of these guys are startable in Week 8. Now we're going to finish with the tight end position. We're going to go with Irv Smith of the Minnesota Vikings. He has been up and down this season, more down than up, I would say. But coming off the bye against the Arizona Cardinals, this is someone that you could probably start more of like a streaming option. He's someone that you can play in the right matchup. And obviously, he's not, this Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews level tight end. But obviously, I'm not going to tell you, Travis Kelce is my start of the week, because that would be a little obvious. So I'm going to try to help you guys out, give you a more low-key, under-the-radar guy. The Cardinals are very bad at defending the tight end position, so I think Irv Smith could be fantasy relevant. He's a low tight end 1, I would say. And it doesn't take much to be relevant for fantasy at the tight end position. So If he puts up like 50, 40 plus yards, maybe gets in the end zone, I wouldn't be shocked. And then finally, our final player of the video is going to be TJ Hockenson, tight end of the Detroit Lions. He has been a disappointment for fantasy, obviously. He had one huge game in week 4 against the Seattle Seahawks. That is the best matchup for tight ends, and he proved why. Other than that, he's been pretty disappointing. No real big games. He's had a couple pedestrian games. Got in the end zone in week 3. He had about 48 yards in week 7, so he's been disappointing. But in week 8, with the Lions wide receiver core a little banged up, I think he might need to be relied on a little bit. And sort of like with Irv Smith, I don't necessarily think he's a lock for like 100 plus yards or anything like that. But at that tight end position, it's hard to find production. So unless you have, Travis Kelce, Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz, guys like that, I think TJ Hockenson is that next tier down for week 8 of the 2022 fantasy football season. All right, now we're also going to quickly end the video with a recap of our week 7 starts of the week calls, just to see what went well and didn't go well. At quarterback, we had Tua against the Steelers. He was a little disappointing, but he still finished as the quarterback 11 on the week. We also went with Dak Prescott returning from injury in a good matchup with the Lions. He didn't do very well for fantasy, 12.28 points, so he was disappointing. Ezekiel Elliott was the one that scored the touchdowns there. But then I also said to start Jimmy Garoppolo, and he was the quarterback 10 with about 16 points on the week. So there were some big names on bye last week, so it makes sense that it didn't take as much to put up quarterback 1 numbers just with the people that weren't playing. And my laptop is sounding like a jet engine right now. I don't think it likes using OBS. Usually I use my PC, but when you're traveling, you got to resort to the Mac, and it's not handling this very well. So let's try to wrap this up here. Moving on to the running back position, I said I liked Ezekiel Elliott as a start last week. He was the running back 10 in half PPR, 17.7 points on the back of a couple touchdowns. I think he's a sell high candidate, but with him probably missing week 8, the opportunity to trade high on him is probably gone. I did actually trade him away in one league for Dallas Goedert and Curtis Samuel, so I think I won that trade, especially now that Zeke is going to miss this upcoming week. Then they have a bye week, and he's coming off of a 2-touchdown game where, it was a great matchup. At this point in his career, he's pretty much a 2-down back that you're hoping gets in the end zone. So hopefully you sold high on him when you could, but he was still good for fantasy last week, and I did start him in that same league that I traded him away. And even though he was the running back 10, it did cost me because I sat Aaron Jones, who was the running back 4 on the week, who had 24 points. And I think if I would have made that switch, if I would have played Aaron Jones over Ezekiel Elliott, I would have won. So even though both did well, I still have a kind of a bitter taste because, I lost because I decided to play Zeke over Aaron Jones. It was kind of a weird thing, but in a vacuum, he had a great game for fantasy. Another guy that was great for fantasy, Rhamondre Stevenson, running back 6 on the week. Damian Harris did return, but Rhamondre saw all the volume. And speaking of Rhamondre, I did make him a start of the week, so I'm happy it worked out. But this is the player who, in that league I was just talking about where I barely lost, this is the player that beat me. It was the last drive of the game. They were down like 19, and they threw a pass to Rhamondre Stevenson literally on the last drive, and that is what had my opponent take like a point or 2 lead over me, maybe even less than a point. And then he left the game. It's like, yeah, I don't know why they did that. Bill Belichick must have known that I needed a win and did not want to let that happen. But regardless, we were right on point with our running back calls this previous week, as well as with Kenneth Walker. He was the running back 3 on the week, 28.7 points, pretty much an auto start moving forward. And then, guys, in that last video, okay, this one doesn't even count because I said I was recording it early because I had to leave for my trip. I said I'm throwing Kenyan Drake in as a start of the week, but monitor the news to see what the deal is with the backfield because we didn't know what really was going on with Drake and Gus Edwards. It came out that Gus Edwards was going to be the starter. So Kenyan Drake, who was the guy I talked about in the video, he had a miserable game for fantasy, 11 attempts for 5 yards, half a point in fantasy. But if you listened to the actual video, I said whoever is starting is going to have opportunity against Cleveland. So the spirit of the call was right because the Baltimore Ravens running back that did start, Gus Edwards, was elite for fantasy. He was the running back, where'd he go? I just saw him. 8 So we're going to count that as a win, just because I had to record it so early in the week because I was leaving for that trip that I didn't really know the exact situation, but I even made a note of it. Moving on to the wide receiver position, we are going to go with CeeDee Lamb, and he was just pretty mid, 4 for 70, 8.6 points. The call didn't work out super well, but he did not crush your lineup. And then Amari Cooper, same kind of deal, pretty mid, 3 for 74, 8.9 points. Pretty much the same as CeeDee Lamb. Lazard did not do much for fantasy, but 6 for 55. Also in that same, they're all within 4 spots of each other. So they didn't kill your lineup, but they didn't really help. And then Brandon Aiyuk, he was the best of that set. 7 for 82, 11.7 points. So our wide receiver calls were not terrible, but they weren't great. And then finally, my one tight end start of the week was Gerald Everett, who, if I had played him over Zach Ertz last week, I would have won as well, I'm pretty sure. But I played Zach Ertz, and my start of the week, Gerald Everett, actually had the better game. He was the tight end 8. He had 8.8 points, so at the tight end position, you will take that. So I'm going to say last week was actually very good, especially at that running back position. And yeah, that's going to do it for this video, guys. I'm going to head out, go explore Disney World or something here. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.